Ever since childhood, she had always felt a quiet pull towards the world of books, chalkboards, and helping hands. It wasn't loud or flashy, just a gentle, persistent dream that grew with her, step by step. While others around her imagined themselves becoming doctors, engineers, or traveling the world, her heart quietly whispered one thing: teaching. But, as with most dreams, it wasn't always simple. There were challenges, doubts from others, and even moments where she questioned if she had what it took. Still, that small voice inside her never faded. In fact, the older she got, the stronger it became. She remembered standing in her classroom as a student, watching her own teacher explain something complicated with such calm and clarity, and thinking, "I want to do that. I want to be the person who makes learning feel possible." It wasn't just about sharing knowledge. It was about connecting, guiding, and being the steady hand someone else might need just like she had once needed. But reality can sometimes feel heavier than dreams. As she finished school, there were expectations to find a real career, something more impressive, something that paid better. Family and friends, even if they meant well, would ask, why not something else? Still, she held on to her goal. She started volunteering at local schools, helping children with reading, assisting teachers, and learning from the ground up. Every moment spent in that environment felt right. The noise, the mess, the joy of watching a child finally understand something they had struggled with, it all reminded her why she had chosen this path. Training to be a teacher wasn't easy either. There were long days, tight budgets, tough students, and a lot of paperwork. But through it all, she stayed grounded. She reminded herself that behind every challenge was a chance to grow, not just as a teacher, but as a person. She learned to be patient. She learned to listen. She learned that sometimes the best lessons weren't in the textbook, but in the everyday interactions, the way a child expressed fear before a test, or how a small smile could change someone's day. Her first year in the classroom was a mix of excitement and nerves. Standing in front of her own class for the first time, she could barely believe it. She wasn't just pretending anymore, this was real. And yet, as soon as she began, something clicked. It felt natural. She had spent years preparing for this moment, and now she was living it. Over time, she developed her own rhythm, her own teaching style. Some days were tough, really tough, but the victories, no matter how small, always meant more. Watching a quiet student grow in confidence, helping a struggling reader fall in love with books, seeing a class come together as a team. These were the moments that reminded her she was doing exactly what she was meant to do. And though she started out simply wanting to teach, she discovered that being a teacher meant so much more. It meant being a role model, a cheerleader, a listener, and sometimes even a second parent. It meant learning how to handle chaos with grace, how to stay calm under pressure, and how to celebrate every little success. The real beauty of her journey was that it was never about perfection. It was about persistence, about believing that dreams matter, even the quiet ones, about knowing that changing just one life makes the effort worth it. In the end, she followed her dream not for recognition or praise, but because it felt right. Because deep down she believed in the power of education. And now, every day, she gets to be part of something bigger, helping others learn, grow, and maybe even find their own dreams along the way. And that's what makes her story so powerful. When I first started creating these kinds of stories, I thought a lot about who they were really for. I imagined someone sitting at home, headphones on, maybe after school or work, trying to make sense of a new language. I pictured them pausing and rewinding, wanting to catch every word, not just to understand the story, but to feel like they belonged in the rhythm of the language. And that's why I knew from the very beginning that every word had to be clear, Every sentence had to move at a pace that made learning feel possible, not overwhelming. This story, and others like it, is made especially for B1 learners. That's an important stage in language learning. It's the point where you've already learned the basics, and now you're building confidence to use English in everyday life. You understand quite a bit, but sometimes things still move too fast, or people speak with strong accents, or vocabulary just flies past. So when I speak, I do it slowly, naturally, and clearly, not robotic or unnatural, but in a way that helps you train your ear. Every pause, every rise and fall in tone, every word choice is chosen with care. You see, it's not just about hearing English, it's about understanding it in real situations. That's why real life stories are so helpful. They give context to the language. You're not just memorizing grammar rules or lists of verbs, you're experiencing how English sounds in real life, how it flows in natural conversation. It becomes something you can feel, not just study. And pronunciation matters, it really does. That's why using a clear British English accent throughout the story is a conscious decision. It gives learners consistency. There's a rhythm and tone to British English that many learners want to understand, especially if they're planning to visit, study, or work in the UK. Listening to a consistent accent helps your ears become familiar with the sounds. You begin to notice how certain vowels are shaped, how syllables are stressed, and where natural pauses come in. It's like training a muscle. The more you listen, the stronger your understanding becomes. The structure of the story also plays a big part. Sentences are not too long or complicated. The language is natural, but it avoids idioms that might confuse intermediate learners. I always try to include repetition, not to bore you, but to help build memory. If you hear a useful word or phrase multiple times in different contexts, it sticks. That's the key. You want to be able to recall what you've learned, not just in a test, but in conversation when you need it most. And of course, the subtitles are there for support. You can read along if you need to. Some people find that they understand better when they can see the words, not just hear them. Others listen first and then go back to read, checking for anything they might have missed. However you use the subtitles, they're meant to make you feel in control. You decide the pace. You can go back, slow it down, pause, reflect, because this is your learning journey. I've also made sure to use everyday vocabulary. Things you can actually use in real life. Words related to school, teaching, dreams, goals, things that matter and come up often in daily conversation. There's no point learning words you'll never use. But when you hear something like lesson, student, future, help, or believe in context, and then again and again, it starts to become a part of your thinking. That's the whole idea. You're not just learning to pass an exam. You're learning to understand people, to tell your own story, to feel confident the next time someone speaks to you in English. And that takes practice, but the right kind of practice. Not just memorizing, but listening. Really listening. And so this story, like all the stories I share, is my way of giving you that space. A calm, steady space to listen, to understand, and to grow. With each line, with each scene, you're not just hearing a story, you're stepping deeper into the language. And if you keep showing up, listening day by day, you'll be surprised how much you're truly capable of. When I created this story, one of the most important things I focused on was the kind of vocabulary I used. It had to be simple, useful, and real words that people actually say in classrooms, staff rooms, and school corridors. Because learning English isn't just about memorizing long lists or repeating phrases from a textbook. It's about hearing how words are used in real life, in real situations, and understanding how they connect to emotions, actions, and everyday routines. So, in this story, you'll hear a lot of language that's common in a school setting, not just the formal words, but also the phrases teachers and students say to each other naturally. Words like lesson, classroom, homework, register, assembly, and break time. These are words that learners will hear all the time if they go to school in an English-speaking country, or even if they're teaching or working with children in any environment. They aren't just school words, they're part of daily life. And then there are the phrases that carry meaning beyond just the vocabulary. Things like please take your seats, let's begin, open your books to page 10, or work with your partner. These kinds of expressions are simple, but they carry a lot of power. They set the tone of the classroom, they help learners follow instructions, and they give a rhythm to the way people communicate in that space. When you hear those phrases used in context, when a teacher gently guides a class through a task, or when a student asks for help, it's easier to remember them. You're not just learning them as dry information. You're connecting them to a moment, to a feeling, to a character, and that's when the words start to stick. For intermediate learners, this kind of exposure is gold, because you already know the basics words like book, or student, or teacher, but now you're ready to build on that foundation, to understand how words work together, to feel comfortable not just recognizing vocabulary, but using it naturally. That's why I repeat some of the key phrases in different scenes. You might hear group work, or marking, or parent meeting more than once, and that's on purpose. Repetition in a meaningful context helps you internalize the language without even realizing it. I also included emotional language, things like nervous, excited, proud, or tired. Because in a classroom, people feel all kinds of emotions. Teachers worry about their lessons. Students feel shy or confident or distracted. And all of that gives us more opportunities to use real language in ways that feel human and relatable. Even simple exchanges like "Can I go to the toilet?" or "I forgot my homework" are part of learning. They're not complicated sentences, but they're incredibly useful. And if you're a learner who ever plans to study, teach, or work in an English-speaking environment, those little phrases make a big difference. I also thought about the adults in the story, teachers, talking to colleagues or parents. So you'll hear vocabulary around staff meetings, school reports, lesson plans, and feedback. Again, none of it is overly technical, but it's exactly the kind of language that builds confidence when used in conversation. And this isn't just useful for people working in schools. It helps anyone improve their general English. Words like explain, ask, listen, repeat, and correct, these are common across many parts of life. They're words you'll hear in meetings, in training, in shops, or at the doctor's. So by listening to them in this story, in a teaching environment, you also learn how to use them in other places. That's really the goal, to make English feel less like something you study and more like something you live. Something you understand not just with your mind, but with your experience. So every word you hear in this story has been chosen with care. Not just to tell a story, but to teach. Not by giving you a lesson in the traditional way, but by letting you live inside the language for a while, to hear it, feel it, and slowly, confidently, make it your own. When learning a new language, especially one like English with so many sounds and accents, it can feel overwhelming at times. You might hear someone speak and understand nothing at first, even if you've studied grammar and vocabulary for years. That's something many learners go through, and it's exactly why this story and others like it are built with listening confidence in mind. The goal is not just to help you understand the words, but to make you feel like you're truly getting it, step by step. That feeling of understanding something on your own, even just a sentence or a short exchange, it builds your belief in yourself, and that belief matters more than people realize. One of the best tools for building that kind of confidence is using subtitles. Not just as a translation, but as a support system. When you're listening to English, your brain is trying to catch the rhythm, the sounds, and the meanings all at once. It's like trying to understand a moving train. Subtitles slow that train down. They give your mind a second chance to catch up, to connect the sound of the word to its meaning, to its spelling, to the emotion behind it. It turns passive listening into active learning. I always encourage learners to watch with subtitles on the first time, not because they can't do it without, they probably can, but because having the text there removes the pressure. It allows you to relax, knowing that if you miss something, the answer is right there. That relaxation actually makes it easier to take in the language. When we're tense or worried about understanding, our brains block things out. But when we feel safe and supported, like with subtitles, we're more open to absorbing everything around us. What happens over time is really powerful. The more you watch with subtitles, the more your ears start recognizing the sounds on their own. Your brain begins to link the spoken word to its written form. You start to predict what's coming next, and slowly you rely less on the subtitles. You start to test yourself. Maybe you watch a scene again, this time without reading. Maybe you realize you understood more than you thought. That moment is everything. That's when confidence grows. I've designed this story so that the subtitles match the spoken English exactly. There are no complicated words thrown in just for effect. No rushed dialogue or unclear pronunciation. Everything is paced so that learners at the B1 level can follow with clarity. And more importantly, they can feel successful. Because when you understand a full story, told in a natural way, and follow it from beginning to end, even if you need a little help from subtitles, you prove to yourself that your English is working. That you're not just studying, you're really communicating. Subtitles also help with pronunciation and spelling. Many English words don't sound the way they look, and that can be frustrating. But when you hear a word and see it at the same time, you begin to understand those patterns. You see how enough is pronounced with an F sound. You notice the silent letters in teacher or listen. And those small discoveries add up. They make your speaking clearer and your writing stronger. Another important benefit is vocabulary retention. When you hear a new word and immediately see how it's spelled and used in context, you're more likely to remember it. You might even pause the video, write it down, and try using it in your own sentence. That kind of engagement makes learning stick. But the biggest change I see in learners who use subtitles regularly is that they stop being afraid of spoken English. They stop worrying about accents or speed or unfamiliar expressions. They start to enjoy the process of listening like how we enjoy a good story in our own language. That shift from fear to enjoyment is what unlocks real progress. Confidence doesn't come all at once. It builds quietly, piece by piece, every time you understand a sentence you couldn't before, every time you watch a full story without needing to pause too much, every time you feel just a little more sure of what you heard. And it's through that process that your English doesn't just improve, it becomes a part of you. What I love most about stories like this one is that they don't just help you learn English, they quietly remind us of the values that matter in real life. As we listen and follow along, we're not just hearing about a teacher or a classroom, we're hearing about something deeper, a quiet kind of strength, That's what makes this story so meaningful. It's not loud or dramatic, but it carries something powerful values like dedication, patience, and the belief that learning never truly ends. Dedication is one of those things that you don't always notice right away, but it's always there in the background. It's waking up early even when you're tired. It's preparing for a lesson no one else sees. It's staying behind after everyone has left just to make sure one student gets the help they need. And it's not about applause or recognition. Dedication is about doing what needs to be done because you believe it matters. That's what you hear in the story, someone who has chosen this path not for reward, but because they feel it's the right thing to do. Patience is something else that quietly stands out. It's easy to be patient for a day. It's harder to be patient every single day, especially when things don't go as planned, and they often don't in real life. A child might not listen, a lesson might not work. You might explain something 5 times and still see confusion in someone's eyes. That's when patience becomes more than a quality, it becomes a decision. To stay calm, to try again, to believe that even small progress is still progress. And it's not just the kind of patience teachers need, it's the same kind of patience that language learners need too. When you're learning English or anything new, you have to give yourself time. You have to let yourself make mistakes. You have to keep going, even when it's slow. And this story, in its quiet way, reminds us of that truth. Then there's the idea of lifelong learning, something that's easy to say, but harder to live. Sometimes we think learning ends with school or university, but the truth is we never stop learning, not if we're curious, not if we're growing. In the story, you can feel that learning doesn't only happen for the students, it happens for the teacher too. Every day, she learns something new about her class, about herself, about how to teach better, and that's a message for all of us. No matter where we are in life, whether we're just starting out or have years of experience, we always have something to learn. It's easy to overlook these values in everyday life. We get busy, we rush, we focus on outcomes, but stories like this help us slow down and notice what's really happening underneath. They remind us that real success isn't always measured in numbers or grades or goals reached. Sometimes it's measured in how much we care, how much we're willing to give, how much we grow even when no one's watching. And that's something I always hope learners take away from listening, not just the English, but the feeling behind the words. Because as you build your language skills, you're also building something else. Character, and stories are one of the best ways to do that. They don't tell you what to think, they show you what it looks like when someone keeps going. When someone faces challenges, not with anger, but with quiet strength. When someone gives their time, their energy, their heart, not because they have to, but because they want to make a difference. Dedication, patience, and lifelong learning aren't things you can learn from a dictionary. You feel them. You see them in people who live those values, and when you hear stories like this one, you start to feel them for yourself. You begin to believe that maybe you, too, can be that steady, kind, determined person in whatever role you choose, and maybe, just maybe, that's the most important thing a story can teach. One of the most powerful parts of learning through stories is that it doesn't just improve your English, it gets you thinking about your own life too. As you follow along, listening to someone's journey, you start to ask yourself questions. Where am I going? What do I really want to do? What would make me proud if I looked back years from now? That's exactly what a story like this is meant to do. It helps you practice listening, yes, but it also gently pushes you to think more deeply about your own path, about the kind of life you want to create. When you hear about someone who followed their dream of becoming a teacher, Despite the challenges, the long hours, the doubts, it makes you reflect on what dream you might have been holding back. Maybe it's something you've thought about for years but never spoken aloud. Maybe it's something that feels impossible right now. Or maybe, like in the story, it's something simple and quiet, but very real, the desire to do something meaningful, to help others, to create something lasting. These thoughts often come up when we listen to stories because we see a part of ourselves in them. They make us pause and reflect in ways that textbooks can't. And the beautiful thing is, while you're thinking about all of this, you're also learning English. You're improving your listening skills, expanding your vocabulary, and understanding sentence structures. You're doing something practical and something personal at the same time. That combination is powerful. Because language isn't just a tool for passing exams, it's a bridge to expressing who you are and what you dream of becoming. So as you listen to someone else's story, you're also preparing to tell your own. A dream career doesn't have to be big or impressive to anyone else. It just has to matter to you. Maybe you've always wanted to run your own cafe, or become a nurse, or work with children, or fix things with your hands. Or maybe you're still figuring it out. That's okay. Listening to stories about other people's journeys reminds you that everyone starts somewhere, and the path isn't always straight. What matters most is that you stay curious, open, and willing to take small steps forward, even if you're not sure where they'll lead just yet. The great thing about stories like this one is that they show the process. You don't just see someone achieving their dream, you hear about the work, the waiting, the little moments of doubt and hope. That's something we don't always talk about when we speak of success. We show the result, but we don't often show the journey. This story brings that journey into focus slowly, honestly, and it makes the idea of chasing your own dream feel more real, more possible. And if you're someone who's learning English as part of your own dream, maybe to move to a new country, or to study abroad, or to get a better job, then this kind of story is especially important, because it connects language learning with something emotional and motivating. It's not just about remembering vocabulary, it's about feeling inspired. It's about hearing someone else push through their doubts and thinking, maybe I can too. This connection between language and dreams is something I care deeply about. Because learning a new language takes courage, it takes time, it takes trust in yourself. But when that learning is connected to something meaningful like your hopes for the future, it becomes more than just a task. It becomes part of your purpose. So while you're listening, while you're following along with each sentence and each scene, let yourself think about where you want to go. What does your version of success look like? What are you willing to work for, step by step? And how can English help you get there? You don't need to have all the answers now, but starting to ask those questions, starting to imagine the possibilities, that's already a big step forward. And if this story helps even one person feel a little clearer, a little braver, or a little more committed to their own journey, then it's done more than teach English, it's helped someone move closer to who they're meant to be. Thank you for joining me in this journey today. I hope this story didn't just help you practice your English, but also helped you connect with something more personal, your goals, your values, and the quiet strength that's already inside you. We followed a real-life path, one full of small decisions, big dreams, and steady commitment. You listened to clear, slow British English that was made just for learners like you, learners who are serious about improving and ready to grow. You picked up everyday vocabulary, useful expressions, and the natural flow of classroom life. You built your listening confidence with subtitles and maybe even surprised yourself with how much you understood. You heard the power of patience, dedication, and the idea that learning is never finished, not in school and not in life. And most of all, I hope this story encouraged you to think about your own journey, your own dream, because while learning English is part of this process, becoming the person you want to be, that's the real destination. Keep listening, keep learning, and most importantly, keep believing in yourself. Until next time,